Lecture 1, Hospitality, Restaurants, Theme Parks, Leisure. At 9:18 p.m. on a still July night in Orlando, 300 LEDs lift into formation over a man-made lagoon and right a wheel of light that turns at 4 meters per second, holds station within a meter at 120 meters above ground level, then snaps into a leaping dolphin before dissolving into a sponsor's logo. A decibel meter on the terrace never breaks 80. The smell is sunscreen and chorus, not perchlorate and sulfur. The fleet. Today it is Verge Aero or UViFi. Yesterday it was Intel's Shooting Star Swarms that debuted over Disney Springs in 2016, flies pre-computed trajectories with 3 to 5 meter separation, respects wind caps of roughly 8 to 10 meters per second, and sits inside centimeter level real-time kinematic corrections. Anti-collision strobes and trained night crews live where the FAA's April 2021 update to Part 107 put them, and the maintenance ledger is the opposite of poetry, batteries, props, weather windows, spares. The magic is pixels. The receipts are lower particulate matter, quieter nights, and a show log a safety officer can love. Hospitality is a choreography problem wearing a smile. Linens must cross floors that change every 20 minutes, plates must thread 90 centimeter aisles at dinner peak, roofs need eyes within hours after gusts cross 10 meters per second. Fireworks permits must coexist with neighbors who prefer sleep. The robots that actually pay rent here are mostly not humanoid. Autonomous runners cruise at between 0.7 and 1.2 meters per second, obey the conservative public space safety envelope implicit in UL 3300, and ask Schindler, Kone, or Otis elevators for rides through sanctioned APIs. Docked quadrotors with paired electro-optical and thermal sensors, usually in the DJI MatRice 300 or 350 RTK class, wake early after storms and bring back truth before breakfast. Humanoids appear as cameos, not cast, engineered arts a mecha doing a meet and greet, or a soft-skinned mobile manipulator that opens a door and leaves an amenity at chest height under strict speed caps and safe talk limits. If you want a date when the elevator opened to machines with badges, circle 2014 in Cupertino. Savioke's Relay, later Relay Robotics, rode aloft's lifts, knocked on doors after midnight with toothpaste, and proved the only metric hotels worship, minutes saved without drama. 2 years later, Hilton's lobby experiment, Connie, tried Q&A in McLean, cute, noisy, forgettable. What stuck were plumbing and policy. In August 2016, Part 107 made small UAS work legal. In 2019, Europe's Regulation 2019-947 harmonized open and specific categories. In 2021, the US rules added routine night operations and flights over people under defined kinetic energy thresholds. Those dates turned drones from stunt to schedule and told operations chiefs exactly what a Tuesday inspection looks like without a scissor lift and a lane closure. The orchestration layer is the unglamorous star. A property management system such as Oracle Opera or Protel tells a robot which rooms are vacant and which doors it may open. A point of sale like Toast or Oracle Micros pushes the order flow that a bare robotic Servi or Pudu Bellabot turns into tray runs at dinner peak. A building management system exposes elevator dry contacts, door strikes, and access levels with logs of fire marshal can read. Runners live on segmented VLANs or private LTE slices, show fleets use wired ground stations with reserved spectrum so guest phones cannot drown telemetry. Inspection drones avoid crowded 2.4 GHz the moment a roof deck warms to 40 degrees Celsius and TikTok wakes. Nobody buys AI, they buy reliable bends in a Gantt chart. Front of house during peak covers in Anaheim or Osaka is a physics exam. A Pudu Bellabot with 4 trays moves 10 to 20 kilograms along 90 centimeter aisles at roughly 1 meter per second, making 10 to 20 Hz LiDAR decisions at ankle height and 15 to 30 Hz RGBD checks above the knee. A bare robotic Servicarts bust tubs on the same loop, yielding at right angle corners with compliant bump skins that kill drive in tens of milliseconds. Keen T-series units tack between banquets and dish lanes under humidity that would shame a terrarium. Their night shift ends with alcohol wipes and wheel inspections because tiled floors discover every sloppy seal. The economics fall from the ceiling, 300 covers between 6 and 9 p.m., 2 human runners replaced by 1 human plus 1 robot. Average check rises because a server stays in section. Repetitive strain complaints and tray drop incidents curve down. The kitchen is an optical life factory, specular stainless, steam plumes, puddles turned into mirrors by downlights, and the runners that survive do 3 boring things well. They read fiducials tucked near baseboards where mops do not erase them. They quantize exposure to mains frequency so LED panels do not ban the vision feed that decides whether a trolley is a chair or a child. And they publish stop distance certificates the safety officer can test at the start of shift, 30 centimeters at half a meter per second on dry tile, closer to 60 on a wet patch by the pass, because liability is a measurement, not a mood. ISO 13482 is not optional in a dining room. It is gravity with clauses about speed and force limits, soft stops, and stability. UL 3300's 2024 edition adds electrical and functional safety for robots around the general public and even anticipates accessibility for guests with impaired vision or hearing. Roofs are where drones graduated from Instagram to instrumentation. A mattress-class craft with RTK flies a facade route at 7 meters per second before sunrise, holds 30-degree oblique so cracks show in relief, then sweeps vac cabinets in thermal to find components running 10 degrees above baseline. With steady wind at 12 meters per second, the mission moves, with gusts spiking, it is scrubbed. Battery endurance in brochures says 50+ minutes, operations assume 20 to 35 minutes under load and heat. Remote ID began phasing in 2023. ASTM F3411 is the accepted means of compliance, parachute systems evaluated under ASTM. F3322 are the ticket for some, over people, scenarios, although most hospitality flights simply draw hard cones over crowd space and never cross them. The deliverable is not the hero shot, it is a defect list and 3 work orders before noon. Inside the elevator, a sociology experiment masquerades as a metal box. Vertical permission is 4 steps, a credentialed call to the lift, a car capture that never traps guests, a floor assignment with timeout, and stored state so a robot that promised 14 does not bail at 12 after a transient packet loss. Old controllers want relay contacts and dry fingers, new ones offer APIs with rate limits and fallbacks that send the car home clean if anything gets weird. The Humanoid Cameo lives here, a light inertia mobile manipulator with peak wrist forces in the single-digit newtons holds a door, pulls a handle with 10 to 20 newtons, places an amenity bag at chest height, and leaves. The specs are not glamour, they are motor current limits, ISO 13482, power and force limiting, and a curfew so you do not become a ghost story with a cart. Theme parks are everything at once. At 5:40 a.m. facilities tech launches a thermal sweep over 5 hectares of flat roof with juice still cooling the membrane. At 10:30 a.m. convoy of T-Series and Servicarts hauls trays across Terrazzo while a Bellabot glides like a cat that learned HR. At 21:15 a.m. show fleet climbs in rings from a launch rectangle behind a painted berm to altitudes between 60 and 150 meters. Geofences match egress paths and helipad standoffs. Observers stand where Cap 722 in the United Kingdom or SORA authorization in the European Union told them to stand. A gust step above 10 meters per second at altitude triggers an early landing cadence rehearsed like a fire drill. Quiet hours in municipal codes become show windows. The win is not ooze, it is 0 near misses in the incident log in a city that does not call. The ledger line that convinces a general manager is rude and correct. A 200-room tower at 70% occupancy flips roughly 140 rooms per day, shave 10 minutes off the last 10 meters by letting a mobile manipulator hold doors, help duvets, and stage amenities while a housekeeper signs off, and you buy back more than 20 labor hours on a Tuesday in August without a staffing miracle. A restaurant that logs 750 staff kilometers of walking per month can push 2/3 of that into carts and drop knee and shoulder complaints that cost claims last year. City shows now come with a second column the fireworks never offered. In Redwood City, California, Independence Day moved to 400 drones for a 12-minute program in 2025 at $87,000 versus $187,000 for fireworks. Injuries dropped to 0 and noise complaints to near none, a 53% cost reduction and a non-combustive sky over a drought-prone county. Regulation is invisible architecture that lets all of this be polite. Part 107, effective 2016, remains the small UAS backbone in the United States. In 2021 the rulemaking formalized night operations and routine flights over people via categories 1 through 4, with impact energy thinking and mitigations like propeller guards and parachutes. In the European Union, Regulation 2019-947 splits risk across open, specific, and certified categories. Most parks and stadiums end up inside the specific bucket via SORA paperwork and mitigations if they insist on proximity to people. In the United Kingdom, Cap 722 reads like a liturgy at safety briefings. On the ground, UL 3300 is quickly becoming the product safety spine for service and entertainment robots. ISO 13482 remains the personal care safety baseline for mobile servants operating among the public. The operator who can say those numbers out loud tends to keep their job. Trust is not a vibe, it is a policy with nouns. Surveillance edges in lobbies, restaurants, pools, and concourses mean robots default to minimization and deletion. In California, CPRA adds teeth to notice and purpose limitation. In Europe, GDPR governs guests and staff without caring whether the camera belongs to a human or a robot. The hospitality playbook that ages well reads like a social contract. No facial analytics, no open mics, no persistent tracking. Mission video stays on device unless it is tied to a work order. Guest-facing devices display what they do and when they die. The operational benefit is prosaic. Less legal exposure, fewer staff rebellions, fewer guests filming you back for sport. Non-humanoid appliances are the real celebrities if you look where the work lives. AvidBot's class floor scrubbers map concourses at 0.8 to 1.2 meters per second, carry 80 to 120 liters of solution, and publish coverage maps you can overlay with complaints so you discover that row G always gets missed before Saturday checkouts. Pool decks get cousins with ingress protection that stops short of please drive into a fountain. The ones that thrive do not improvise near wet tiles. AMR tuggers in back corridors haul 80 to 150 kilograms of laundry and banquet gear the way Ethan's TUG remade hospitals a decade ago. Same safety stack. Same ISO 3691 to 4 speed and separation logic. Different loads. Wheels for distance, rotors for eyes, hands for exceptions. 10 years out is not prophecy, it is extrapolation with receipts. Premium resorts normalize nightly drone spectacles with permits that live in a folder and wind caps everyone can recite. Rooftop inspection sorties stage against weather forecasts pulled into a venue's digital twins so dawn flights land between storms and glare. Runners bind to point of sale peaks automatically and disappear by 21:30 when hallways fill with strollers. 25 years out, housekeepers start rooms and hand the last 10 minutes to mobile manipulators that never forget a doorstop. Queues balance themselves with AMR add-ons that move stanchions, and a multilingual humanoid appears for a 90-person surge to do language triage, then vanishes. 50 years out, the phrase, robot hotel, sounds as dated as, color television. Fleets are ambient, like elevators and dishwashers with APIs. The R&D backlog is gloriously UN cinematic and entirely solvable. Manipulation in crowded, glossy rooms wants tactile arrays that feel slip under a millimeter and cut force before a ramekin becomes a projectile. Vision wants banding-proof pipelines locked to mains so LED panels never smear a gesture. SLAM needs to stop lying near mirrors by making beacons and floor-level fiducials part of building standards instead of hacks. Show fleets need gust-aware control tuned for parapet edge shear. Inspection kits want flare-resistant imaging that refuses to hallucinate through wet membrane glare. Runners need better elevator diplomacy. Dry contact kits that survive cabinets labeled 1998 and APIs that rotate credentials before IT screams. None of this wins a sizzle reel, all of it wins a Tuesday. Airports are the scene where hospitality and regulation shake hands like lawyers, and the choreography ports cleanly to hotels. Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky International's curb-to-gate runs along defined 200 to 400 meter routes with lateral speed capped around 1 meter per second, elevators cleared by facilities, and lids that open by code at gates. The win is temperature, not futurism. Food arrives 7 to 10 degrees Celsius hotter, abandoned cart incidents fall, and concession revenue stops evaporating when departures slip 90 minutes. The same loop, lobby to elevator to floor to door, turns into a hotel robot doing half the miles while a human does all the smiles. Markets taught everyone the impolite lesson by 2024, if you can pay a robot to walk the distances staff hate, you should. Humanoid performers earn their keep only if you buy exactly what they can do. A mecha draws a reliable 10-meter queue every 40 minutes in Dubai or Osaka. The engineering that matters is noise. Servo whine at 2 kHz ruins dialogue. A 4 to 5 decibel cap at 1 meter makes the bit work. Scripts must time in Arabic and Japanese without collapsing under idioms. The economics multiply cost. A silicon host does 3 languages and patient selfies while a human down the hall de-escalates a stroller pileup and calls a supervisor before a queue becomes a campfire myth. Hospitality pays for receipts, not goosebumps. Crowds punish improvisation, so parks treat autonomy like a gradient instead of a creed. Follow behaviors match human walking pace in painted lanes. Crossings happen at right angles with audible prompts that do not impersonate a reversing truck. Stop distances are tested and printed by the safety officer at the start of shift. The same venues that learned hydraulic etiquette with audio animatronics in 1963 now ask for acceleration envelopes in meters per second squared and maximum contact forces in newtons for anything that moves near toddlers. Continuity is the quiet engine of adoption. Half a century of showcraft becomes a modern robot specification without breaking character. The only way any of this remains a delight rather than a headline is to keep the governance dull and public. In Orlando, Anaheim, Paris, Dubai, Kyoto, different alphabets, same script. Venues publish noise windows for shows, draw cones on maps before flights, train operators on radios that do not step on security, and put a laminated card on every robot, who it is, what it does not do, and who to push if it stops. Deletion schedules are printed, not implied, cleaning checklists name chemicals and dwell times, pilot currency lives where the auditor can see it. You do not get to keep the future if you will not show your homework. The arc is simple and a little funny. Fireworks with ash and toddlers crying at 10 p.m. yields some nights to pixels at 80 decibels and a sky that returns to stars in 16 minutes. Servers with sore knees trade 10 kilometers of corridor for 2 hours of upselling. A housekeeper who once wrestled a cart through a heavy door now lets a small polite machine do the shove while she checks a mattress seam and signs a room back into inventory by 1450. The revolution here is the opposite of spectacle. It is scheduled, credentialed, low-drama competence. The guest remembers the view, the food, and the quiet. The robots remember the route, the wind, and to charge before dawn. A commercial kitchen is thermodynamics under probation, fryers at 175 to 190 degrees Celsius venting water vapor and aerosolized fat into hoods sized in cubic meters per minute, walk-ins at 2 to 4 degrees breathing out moisture on each door open, dishwashers pumping 60 to 71 degree wash and 82 to 85 degree final rinse. And the robots that survive here do it by respecting grease, hack, and tempo. Miso Robotics Fryline prototypes hit Helleberger in 2017 and moved into White Castle pilots by 2020, gantry over hot oil, thermal cameras sampling at tens of hertz, and a cycle time variance that pulls baskets inside plus or minus 5 seconds. Pizza assembly followed, meter sauces in tens of grams per slice at conveyor speeds under a meter per second, hold dough humidity, keep grammage honest. Drinks were the low-hanging fruit. Bitrista and Company dropped into casual dining at 150 to 300 cups per hour, and Stadium beer systems stabilized yields within half an ounce through a 3-hour crush. The constraints read like public health, food contact elastomers that survive chlorine and peracetic acid, stainless that chooses 316L near citruses, and nightly sanitization that actually honors dwell times. Back-of-house logistics is where non-humanoid robots eat miles nobody wants. Laundry plants feeding 500 to 1200 room towers push carts at 80 to 150 kilograms. Tuggers at 0.8 to 1.2 meters per second keep jerk under half AG so soup does not leap and carts do not skate. Basements sit at dew points north of 20 degrees Celsius. Lint drifts, sensors skew conservative. A two-dimensional safety lidar at shin height, compliant bumper skins for last centimeter truth, and downward optical flow where floors shine and reflective artifacts whisper lies to slam. Industrial dish rooms run 60 to 70 degree sprays, AMR's ferry racks between soiled and clean on 80 to 120 meter loops while respecting red and green lanes borrowed from infection control doctrine. The comedy is puddles, the fix is fenders, IP-rated enclosures, and wipe downs with printed dwell times, because a quaternary ammonium left for 20 seconds instead of 3 minutes is theatre, not sanitation. Housekeeping, the last 10 minutes of a room turn, is a kinematics lab disguised as fluffing pillows. Door closers on interior slabs tend to sit under the 5-pound force opening cap. A mobile manipulator with 6 degree of freedom wrists and soft grippers needs 25 to 40 newtons at the handle with compliance that forgives misalignment and never pinches skin. Duvet corners ask for 0.3 to 0.5 newton meters of torque, below any industrial arms threshold but above most hobby skins patients. The base does the physics, 60 to 75 kilograms for stability under arm extension, 500 to 700 watts peak through 10 to 12 centimeter wheels to clear 12 to 16 millimeter thresholds, and safe torque-off chains that drop drives in under 200 milliseconds when bumpers twitch. The winning material palette is TPU bumpers and soft skins over antimicrobial shells, with cable runs routed so they never hook a duvet loop in a slapstick encore. Batteries are chemistry with opinions and buildings are flammable, so hospitality stopped pretending otherwise. UL-type standards exist for the boxes we keep near guests. UM 38.3 governs transport, NFPA thinking governs where you charge. Robots that last publish pack IDs, cycle counts, and temperatures. Private LTE and Wi-Fi schedulers ask for staggered charging windows so you do not stack 2 to 6 kilowatt loads in a housekeeping closet in July. Maintenance replaces a swollen cell on schedule rather than on Twitter. The only way to keep insurers calm is a battery cabinet plan that a fire marshal can love and logs of charge cycles that match the robot hours you claimed. Birds do not care about renderings. Waterfront venues and desert amphitheaters learned that gulls and swallows will test your swarm at 60 to 120 meters, peregrines own the sky when they feel like it, and municipal patience for wildlife harassment is measured in signatures. Show directors now pencil bird checks into the pre-flight, a spotter 10 minutes early with binoculars, a no-ascent call if a raptor circles, and a runtime plan that lets a formation skip a frame rather than cross paths with the hunter. It is not poetry to say, do not fly during local nesting weeks. It is the difference between keeping a permit and apologizing to a city council. The non-technical bottlenecks are paperwork with feelings. Unions in Las Vegas, Orlando, Macau, and Osaka do not oppose robots, they oppose surprises and scope creep. You win by writing scopes that move the slog to machines and move people to higher value minutes, you lose by forgetting to write. Insurers do not hate drones and humanoids, they hate novelty without logs. You win by naming standards, UL 3300 for service and entertainment robots in public spaces, ISO 13482 for personal care safety, FAA, and EASA flavors for air, and by showing your receipts. City attorneys do not hate light shows, they hate complaints. You win when decibels at property lines are measured and posted and quiet hours are a calendar entry, not a hope. The programs that make it to year 3 are not the ones with the cutest demo, they are the ones with the best binder. None of this is prophecy. It is inertia under adult supervision, forces at handles, aerosols under hoods, decibels under ceilings, meters per second in aisles, and logs that survive discovery. The job is to be forensic about mechanisms and unembarrassed about joy, to say 0.3 G jerk cap on the dining room runner at 1910, with the same calm you say, we gave your daughter a blue dolphin in the sky at 2103. Machines do the slog, humans decide what counts, the ledger balances in minutes, not vibes. At 5:12 a.m., before the gates admit strollers or lanyards, a maintenance foreman in Osaka signs out a caged drone and a magnetic crawler like a butcher signs out knives. The caged unit, an Helios-class quadcopter with its carbon fiber hoop, slips under the steel ribs of an indoor coaster at roughly half a meter per second, LEDs throwing raking light across welds and bolted joints that human inspectors only see with a harness and a headache. The magnetic crawler takes the underside passes the way a gecko takes glass, rolling ultrasonics across gusset plates to spot sub-millimeter wall loss long before flaking paint tattles on corrosion. The point isn't futuristic, it's centimeters and hours. West Edmonton Mall cut a coaster inspection from 10 to approximately 2 hours and saved about $57,000 by not erecting scaffolds. DMX addresses don't climb ladders and neither should people when a caged drone can map a truss without GPS in a structure the size of a town square. The map's the product, a 3D model good enough to hang work orders on, pulled into the venue's GIS so a cracked anchor plate gets a tile, a timestamp, and a ticket instead of a shrug. A resort roof is a geography lesson in heat and seams, and it rewards the drone teams that treat photogrammetry like an instrument, not a vibe. The pre-dawn facade run isn't for Instagram, it's a survey flown at 20 to 50 meters above ground level with global shutter exposures at 1/500th to 1,000th of a second so LED flicker doesn't gaslight the pixels, and then a thermal pass at sunrise so 8 to 40 micrometer radiance turns wet membrane blisters into obvious bright coins. Because this is a workplace and not a YouTube reel, the deliverable isn't the hero shot, it's a defect manifest. Parapet cap lift on the west wing logged at 7:14, membrane blister diameters near drain 7B, condenser fan motor running 10 degrees above its normal delta T, and 3 punched in work orders before breakfast. The adult bit is paperwork, remote ID broadcasts per the ASTM F3411 pattern so the UAS can be found if anyone asks, and, if a show producer insists on, over people, a parachute recovery system tested under ASTM F3322 makes the risk case legible to a regulator and an insurer. The right graph goes to the CFO anyway. The drone costs under a few tens of dollars an hour to operate, a bucket truck, lane closure, and crew cost in the hundreds. Inside, the air turns theatrical and so do the robots, but the physics stays pitiless. Verity-style microdrones perform in a dome the size of a hangar with indoor localization that rejects GPS entirely. They fly pre-computed paths at a few meters per second on a private, fenced radio network that ignores every guest phone, and, when the producer calls for a spiral of light that pauses above a balcony, the system lands rings in a choreographed fail-safe if a single voltage dips wrong. The same show logic that keeps CERT-class quadcopters from tickling a spotlight operator's hair at 8 meters also keeps the safety case intact, redundancy in the inertial stack, brownout, ladder to the floor, and a perimeter that reads like a fire plan, not a mood board. There is a reason venues that rely on nightly magic increasingly pick LEDs in the air over pyrotechnics, less particulate fallout on roofs, fewer alarm resets at 2 in the morning, and an incident log that never had to describe what a misfired cake did to a sprinkler head. Disneyland Paris codified that shift with Disney Delight in 2022. Smaller cities followed with 4th of July swaps when the cost curve and complaint curve finally crossed in the same direction. If you want to see where hospitality quietly became robotics country, walk the floors that only staff see. Avidbots Neo, Tenants T7AMR, and Nilfisk Liberty class scrubbers crawl concourses at 0.8 to 1.2 meters per second, tanks sloshing 80 to 120 liters, and publish coverage maps you can overlay with last night's complaints about sticky terrazzo by Gate C17. Delivery runners, LGC Alloy Servbots in one lobby, Keenon Peanut or Pudu Bellabot in another, live by the same boring orthodoxy. UL 3300 certification for public space robots, ISO 13482 envelopes for speed and contact force, and elevator APIs that obey a building's access control like a polite intern. If a unit brushes an ankle, soft skins and a safe talk-off chain must turn that moment into nothing at all. If it meets a stroller parade, the proxemics code yields long before a parent does. Meanwhile, the old joke about robots scaring jobs away has been replaced by a spreadsheet about strained backs and kilometers walked. Post-2020 labor shortages turned that punchline into a procurement plan. Front of house spectacle loves a bartender who remembers a face. Back of house throughput loves a robot arm that remembers an ounce. Mark Rashaka's dual manipulator acts like a hygienic industrial cell in a cocktail dress. Flow meters hold pause inside a percent. Syrup lines get peristaltic pumps that don't choke on sugar. And cleanup is a ritual with NSF-ish discipline because the first lawsuit over sticky pumps will arrive exactly as fast as the first influencer. The acoustics budget matters as much as throughput. Gear wine at 2 kHz will turn a pool deck into a dentist's office, so the path planner writes soft stops and the servo drives earn their keep below 70 decibels at a meter. If that sounds joyless, it's supposed to. Variance drops, waste drops, and the ABC ledger balances without a bartender's hands ever being replaced in the rooms where a conversation is still the point. Security at events learned from firefighters, not futurists. For stadium shows and crowded promenades, tethered UAS are the adult choice. An Alistair-class ground station sends power up a microcable and keeps an eye aloft for 10 to 24 hours without an operator juggling batteries behind a barricade. The tether is a power cord and a leash and, crucially, a radio path that doesn't have to swim through the same 2.4 GHz soup as every wristband in the zip code. Put a stabilized optical head on the line, set an orbit or a look-down box, and the incident commander gets persistent, boring, and very useful eyes in the sky over an amphitheater at midnight. That same kit is equally happy on a wildfire or a theme park parade. The underlying physics and the risk math don't care what the crowd came to see. You can tell a mature operation from a demo by the way it quotes regulations. In the United States, Part 107 of the Federal Aviation Regulations, effective August 2016, is the small UAS backbone that lets a resort fly a facade at dawn and a show at dusk. Daylight by default with night permitted since April 2021 if you carry anti-collision lighting and training, a risk-based ladder for flights, over people, that hinges on impact energy and safety features, and waivers when your dreams exceed the default envelope. In the European Union, Regulation 2019-947 split the world into open, specific, and certified. Most parks live in specific, with SORA paperwork and mitigations. Parachutes count when they insist on proximity to crowds. In the United Kingdom, Cap 722 remains the book everyone brings to the safety meeting. None of this bling looks good on a poster, but it keeps neighbors calm and insurers happy, which is the only reason robots get to come back tomorrow. Data governance piggybacks on those same boring virtues. A venue that has learned anything from the past decade writes, no biometrics, no open mics, into its hospitality robots as if it were responding to a disaster, not serving a sandwich. It borrows humanitarian drone etiquette, consent, minimization, deletion windows, from places far more dramatic than a pool deck, and then does the unsexy part, prints retention schedules, trains staff to treat telemetry as operational exhaust not surveillance, and posts a laminated card on every unit that says in plain language what it is, what it does, and who to call. The reward is predictable, fewer arguments with council, fewer on-site rebellions, and fewer guest-filmed a robot filming them moments headed straight for a news chyron they didn't deserve. The economics make their case in the language manager's respect. A single service robot. Completing 50 to 70 room deliveries daily saves 8 to 11 staff hours at prevailing wage rates. In restaurants, Runner bots cut server walking by 20 to 30% and nudge table turn times in the right direction because the human who earns tips stays in their section. Elsewhere, a caged inspection drone paid for itself by replacing scaffolds and rope access on an amusement structure and shaving days off downtime. The West Edmonton Mall case is just the flamboyant example of a general rule. Put cameras and LiDAR where knees and ankles used to go. Even City shows pencil out. When Redwood City's 4th of July swapped fireworks for a 400 drone spectacle, it discovered that batteries and a flight line beat consumables, fire risk, and cleanup, to the tune of a roughly 53% cost reduction per event. Labor isn't a spreadsheet cell, it's a room full of backs and shifts and bargaining units that remember the last time management tried to optimize. Las Vegas hospitality unions have already negotiated how automation shows up, severance cushions for displaced roles, pathways into fleet tech and autonomy wrangler jobs, and a clear line between machines that walk miles and humans who do the talking, selling, and soothing. The programs that survive announce scopes that reduce strain without erasing tips. They put training and pay bands on paper. They report strain incidents and miles walked down and revenue per cover-up. The programs that die are the ones that pretend the machines are mascots and then act surprised when someone notices a job scope silently shrank. Adults write scopes, robots do chores, people do hospitality. Theme park maintenance borrowed a few pages from the transport world because bolts and bearings don't care whether they hold up trains or roller coasters. The same autonomy that lets a Skidio-class aircraft build a close-in 3D model under a bridge deck without GPS is perfectly at home under a steel coaster spine. The same tethered drone that holds position under a viaduct will hover in an atrium truss until a facilities manager gets the angle they need. It's not just convenience, it's safety, replacing hours in a snooper truck over traffic with 20 minutes of rotor time under a span drove worker exposure down by orders of magnitude for highway agencies, and the logic transfers cleanly to a venue walkway or glass canopy. The more these programs look like state-drone teams, pilot currency, maintenance logs, incident reports, the less anyone remembers they were edgy a decade ago. Standards creep in because they prevent creepiness. UL 3300 exists so a service robot in a lobby is an appliance, not a science experiment. ISO 13482 exists so a mobile robot's power and force limiting is a testable promise rather than a hand wave about AI sensing the vibes. ASTM F3411's remote ID messages make a drone accountable. ASTM F3322's parachute tests make it tolerable overheads. And, in the show control booth, the boring, what happens when it fails, ladder beats any number of launch day videos. The programs that last are the ones that memorize those numbers and post them where a fire marshal and a risk manager can see them without squinting. This is not romance, it is the cost of running robots around the general public without needing a PR firm on retainer. If you want a fun bit of engineering that hides inside the everyday, stare at an elevator when a robot asks for a ride. The controller must accept a credential, capture a car without trapping a family of 4, hit a floor with a timeout, and behave if the network hiccups. Old cabinets want dry contacts and good manners. New ones offer rest with rate limits, and every last one of them invites failure if a robot doesn't remember to say sorry and give the car back when anything smells wrong. The wrist that props a door is a study in limits, 10 to 20 newtons at the handle with a soft skin, compliance so a misaligned latch doesn't become a pinch, and a hardwired emergency stop that actually kills drives in under 200 milliseconds instead of merely dimming LEDs. A robot that survives a week of that earns a badge, a fleet that survives a summer without a scary incident earns another line in the budget. Air and water chew on robots like a habit, so the survivors pick materials the way kitchens pick knives. IP54 is the floor for a runner that lives near steam. IP65 starts to sound like sanity in dish pits and on pool decks. Stainless near citric acids earns its keep at 316L. Pool cleaners trundle at 10 to 20 cubic meters per hour and climb 30 to 45-degree walls as if gravity were optional. Deck scrubbers live or die on whether their optics fog or their seals swell after a week of chloramines. Outdoors, GNSS becomes a liar as buildings and trees stack multipath, so lawn robots switch to RTK where possible, UWB anchors and odometry where not, and obey a speed limit that an agronomist and a risk manager can both love. Quiet is a feature. A mower at 54 to 60 decibels A-weighted at 7 meters wins a neighbor where a two-stroke would earn a letter. Event airspace is not a sandbox, it is a truce. A swarm at 60 to 150 meters above ground level must respect a hospital helipad's corridor and a police helicopter's pattern whether or not a producer remembered the map. Local curfews and property line noise caps after 2200 hours decide whether a night carries pyro, LEDs, or nothing at all. Birds are their own counsel. Peregrines do not read SORA paperwork and gulls consider your formation a suggestion. The adult program does bird checks before launch, writes a no ascent rule in nesting weeks, and has a contingency that lands rings in place if something with talons wonders where pixels want to go. The reward for studying biology as hard as air law is a neighborhood that sends thank you emails instead of petitions. None of this machinery works without radios that know their place. Private LTE over CBRS at 3.5 GHz takes the Logita command lanes, Wi-Fi 6 and 6E take video and other gluttons. BLE and UWB carry staff and asset location with a discipline that looks more like a factory than a festival. Time matters as much as bandwidth, a fleet gets along when anchors are surveyed. To centimeters and clocks are disciplined so sensor fusion doesn't hallucinate because a show network decided to party on 2.4 GHz. The practical end of that string is a laminated channel plan and a VLAN map, plus a human whose job title includes the words, spectrum, and battery cabinet, because chemistry and RF both have a sense of humor when ignored. The glide path over the next decade is not science fiction, it is procurement with receipts. Docked inspection drones in roof boxes fly pre-authorized corridors at dawn after storms and push defect manifests to a digital twin that already knows which contractor gets the call. Nightly light shows sit on a city calendar with wind windows and noise budgets codified. Runners bind to peaks from the POS and disappear automatically when the corridor turns stroller heavy. 25 years out, architectural drawings quietly admit what everyone learned the hard way. Robot corridors at 1.2 to 1.5 meters clear width. Ramps instead of 17mm trip lips, elevator controllers with documented APIs instead of folk magic, and service outlets for trickle charging where carts already park. 50 years out, hospitality stops saying, robot hotel, the way no one says, electric elevator, because the appliances acquired personalities and then got boring at exactly the right speed. The only enduring glamour is a human deciding what counts as hospitality and a fleet of literal-minded colleagues turning that into minutes saved and moments made. What ties the whole menagerie together is not chrome or charisma, it's choreography. Put wheels on distance, rotors on eyes, hands on the exceptions, and tie them to standards, radios, and calendars. The result isn't spectacle so much as competence, welds checked without scaffolds, roofs that do not leak twice, queues that flow because robots moved stanchions on time, a sky that glows and goes dark without ash, and staff who finish a shift with knees that still like them. In the ledger, that reads as hours returned and incidents avoided. In the story, it reads as a place that feels well run because it actually is. That is the trick, and it's measurable. A stadium is just a hotel that forgot to sit down, and the robots that survive game day do not believe in magic, they believe in schedules, line of sight, and decibel limits. The light show you see at 2107 is 1,000 pre-computed trajectories uploaded at 1730, each aircraft capped to a mass under a kilogram to stay within, over people, injury thresholds, each with anti-collision strobes that meet the US Part 107 Night Amendment from April 2021, and each broadcasting identity in the remote ID format the FAA phased in during 2023. When Redwood City, California replaced 4th of July fireworks with a 400-drone show in 2025, the math was not patriotic so much as municipal. Approximately $87,000 for drones versus about $187,000 for pyro, a 53% savings plus less particulate fallout on cars and lungs, with a noise profile that kept property line levels under the 55 decibel curfew window. Disneyland Paris proved the nightly cadence in 2022 with a 150-drone, D-Light, formation routine, Intel's 1000+ shooting star. Fleets showed the cold hard scalability at the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics in February 2018, and city risk managers learned to love downwind air sampling because LEDs do not drop ash into ornamental ponds or onto stroller hoods. The rules are dull and adult. In the European Union, 2019 947 pushes most venues into the specific category with a SORA risk case. In the United Kingdom, CAP 722 gets read aloud at production meetings, and in the United States, anything resembling a crowd means Category 1 through Category 3 thinking or waivers, so launch rectangles are drawn behind berms, not beside beer tents. Indoor shows trade weather for geometry and then cheat by telling the room where home is. Cirque du Soleil's Veritidrone collaboration in 2015 demonstrated that micro-UAVs can fly scripted arcs inside a theater by relying on off-board localization, infrared motion capture or UWB anchors, rather than GPS that will never penetrate a roof. The physical choices that keep drones from becoming kamikaze decor are disarmingly simple. A prop shroud that trades 1% or 2% of efficiency for fingers. Mass below a few hundred grams so a worst-case impact is a bandage not a lawsuit. and a control stack that listens to both inertial sensors at hundreds of hertz and the room's beacons at tens of hertz, blending the two through a Kalman filter that a show rigger can reset with a laminated sync card before doors open. The failsafe is artless and good: lose lock and flash, drop to a floor mat, and let the stagehand scoop you up with gloves, suffer a motor fault and let a miniature parachute or net do its job. Following the ASTM F3322 parachute test religion that event insurers increasingly ask to see even indoors. The operator's radio plan is stricter than the band's, reserved 5 and 6 GHz lanes for control, wires for uplink choreography so guest phones cannot drown the show, and telemetry that refuses to share a Wi-Fi SSID with a merchandise booth selling shirts at 7 megabits per second of saturated nostalgia. Events that live outdoors but want all-day eyes learn to lash their drones to umbilicals and make endurance a constant instead of a prayer. Tethered systems like the ones that appeared on the market in 2018 solved multirotor physics with copper, a microtether carrying low-voltage power up from a ground station or, in higher power cases, high-voltage step-down onboard, plus fiber or shielded wire for a robust data link, yields 10 to 24 hours aloft without a battery swap. At a music festival or a marathon routed through a tourist district, that buys a safety officer stable, encrypted ion choke points from dawn to the last shuttle, with the system anchored inside cones and cordons instead of flying over crowds. The trade-offs are the ones engineers like. You give up lateral range and accept a disciplined ground crew to mind the umbilical against lampposts, and you gain a deterministic video feed that keeps running if rain starts just as a headliner takes the stage. Where a venue sits near a wildfire base or a hospital helipad, the air boss calls, no joy, and the tethered eye stays on the ground. Where the rules allow, the box runs all weekend, it's power budget. Look to the watt hour because operating permits now talk in numbers, not vibes. Ride maintenance is where leisure stops pretending and admits its industry with happier paint. If you want to know whether a roller coaster steel is thin enough to worry about, you do not send a human under a deck with a flashlight and hope. You send a magnetic crawler with encoded wheels that cling upside down on a box girder and an ultrasonic thickness array that fires pulses in the megahertz band and measures return time to the microsecond, translating sound into wall loss. Coasters built on tubular track get their well toes and bolt heads photographed at sub-millimeter pixel resolution by a gimbal that can hold a camera at a fixed standoff despite wind and curve, then stitched into a digital twin that carries coordinates instead of hand-drawn arrows on a form. For forklift heights and interiors, inside a steel box girder, inside a dome, inside a themed mountain, collision-tolerant drones in carbon cages fly at a meter per second and bring their own light, bouncing off flanges without ending the mission. The rules that stand behind this choreography are surprisingly canonical. ASTM F24 covers amusement ride safety and increasingly tolerates unmanned inspection data if your method proves resolution and coverage. Facility owners write, no human over the rail unless X, into a lockout-tagout plan. And the maintenance logs that insurance auditors love include not only timestamps and locations but sensor serial numbers and firmware releases because a claim adjuster who can read a version string is a creature of habit and will reward your attention with faster approvals. The glass problem is the quiet terror in hotels and arenas, wind shear that turns a cradle into a pendulum, detergents that turn squeegees into skids, and mullion geometries that defy muscle memory. The emerging solution looks like a building maintenance unit that went to finishing school. A robotized cradle with an industrial arm that has back-drivable joints, a soft compliant end effector, and a vision and lidar head that maps mullions at centimeter truth so you never slam a brush into a protrusion. The wash routine is slower than a veteran and vastly more repeatable, wet with a peristaltic pump that meters surfactant at grams per minute, scrub with a force-limited brush that never exceeds a few tens of newtons against the pane, squeegee with a constant velocity profile, then down a fixed distance before repeat. Wind caps are printed in the manual, 8 to 10 meters per second depending on the cradle and facade. Water recovery is logged because you do not fling runoff onto a terrazzo courtyard and hope. And before any robot touches glass, the human crew executes the same two contracts as always. Tieback lines snap tested at a rated load and a rescue plan if the cradle loses power at 30 stories. What you get in return is boring proof, pane coverage maps that overlay on a model of the tower, a record of per pane cycle times, and a cleaning coefficient that starts to correlate to weather and pollution rather than the mood of a tired crew at 15:30 on a windy Wednesday. Museums and aquariums learn that robots pay rent when they are invisible. In a 60,000-litre tank with cownose rays and parent anxiety pressed against acrylic, a human diver is a maintenance spectacle. A tethered ROV with a camera, a depth sensor, and a brush attachment becomes a polite ghost that scrubs the wall at midnight, inspects intake grates, and never leaks oil into water that is tested hourly. The tether goes through a bulkhead grommet because you do not want a fish exploring a connector. The power budget is measured in hundreds of watts instead of thousands, and the plan exists for what happens when a device gets curious about a pump housing and lodges itself where human hands shouldn't go. In galleries, the technology turns into carpet height AMRs that vacuum under benches and scrub after closing, mapped against exhibit footprints and a curatorial calendar that forbids robots near a delicate textile when a conservator is in the hall with solvents. Humanoid forms make good press when they do a scripted tour at 11 o'clock and say, "Turn left for Impressionism," in 3 languages. Day to day, the winning shapes are cubes and cylinders on wheels, riding elevators that were never meant for machines and pressing badge readers on doors that were never meant for beaks. The safety grammar repeats across venues. ISO 134824, personal care, robots that share space with visitors, caps on speed and force near strollers and wheelchairs, and audible prompts that are not a reversing truck but say, "I'm here," at 50 to 60 decibels in a marble hall that carries echoes like gossip. Expo 2020 Dubai needed 150 plus robot cast members to prove a city-sized public space could run on choreography. Terminus's fleet, guides with touch screens, cleaners with water tanks, logistics carriers with RFID-aware cargo bays, taught the dull lesson that carries everywhere. If your building systems speak, robots can listen. The elevators across the 3.5 square kilometer site did not care about a robot's feelings. They accepted authenticated calls and answered with car IDs, floor numbers, and timeouts. The robots carried IDs too, presenting themselves on a network in ways a security team could monitor without whispering to a vendor's cloud. Their maintenance crews did what venue crews everywhere have to do. Wipe with approved chemicals and document dwell times so a public health officer believes what is on your checklist. Swap batteries on a schedule that prevents puffy cells from turning into rumors. And keep firmware in a state an auditor can verify without learning 16 passwords. What survived beyond the headlines were 2 tables. One that translated building systems, doors, vac, elevators, access control, into APIs an operations team owned, and another that translated jobs into invariant minutes and meters so a manager could defend a purchase order with a straight face. Casinos, where carpet patterns are a form of psychological warfare, turned out to be excellent robot crucibles precisely because they are hostile to perception. Specular threads in carpet light are structured light, chairs migrate unpredictably, noise runs 80 decibels on a good night, and there are categories of employee whose job no one wants a machine to impersonate. The runners that earn their keep slow to 30 or 40 centimeters per second when a chair pivots, use polarization or stereo depth instead of pure time of flight so shiny surfaces stop gaslighting their range images. And follow proxemics that read as empathy, headlights that point where the chassis will go, not just forward, a gentle, "excuse me," chime in the 3 to 5 kHz band that can be heard without spiking blood pressure, and a courtesy stop distance the safety officer can measure at the start of shift, 30 centimeters on dry tile, 60 on carpet with a drop drink. The device never looks like it holds cash, never goes near a cage, and never walks through the high-limit room after 9 p.m., not because it cannot but because sense beats courage in rooms where liquor licenses and union contracts live. Engineering keeps the jokes from writing themselves, detector coverage at ankle height so a toddler does not turn into a blind spot, wheels that behave on a friction coefficient in the 0.5 to 0.7 band where waxed slate and carpet converge, and a battery cabinet plan that satisfies a fire marshal who has memorized the location of every charger in the building. Hotel towers and convention centers are infrastructure disguised as narrative, and the integration layer is the entire plot. If your robot cannot open a Schindler or Otis elevator through a rate-limited API that a building manager controls, it becomes a sculpture. If it cannot badge a Salto or Asa Abloy door reliably with timeouts and fallbacks, it becomes a rumor. If your fleet cannot live on a segmented network, a VLAN with mapped max for safety heartbeats, another for pixels, and a private LTE slice for command that refuses to die when a keynote's Wi-Fi spikes, then you are staging chaos. The battery math is not optional or glamorous. 48-volt packs at 20 to 40 amp hours, cycle counts logged to survive court or warranty, C-rates that do not cook cells in a housekeeping closet when the ambient is 30 degrees Celsius, and cabinets that meet UL and local fire code so your insurer does not get to be surprised in public. The staff are not replaced, they are retitled into shift leads, fleet techs, and autonomy wranglers with radios and gloves, and the union that was briefed in May will show up at the ribbon cutting in August if the tasks that vanished were the miles no one wanted to walk. The one standard that crept into procurement meetings and stayed is UL 3300, the 2024 safety bar for service and entertainment robots operating near the general public. When a vendor says they meet it, the facilities manager can exhale and the city attorney can go back to worrying about something else. Food and drink inside stadiums and parks never loved improvisation, and robots earn their rent by being relentlessly boring during the rush. A high-volume beer station that meters 16 or 20 ounces within half an ounce for 3 hours with less than 10% waste sells 100 quiet victories to finance. A cocktail arm on a cruise ship that sanctions a 60 to 90-second cycle per drink without slinging glass persuades a marine purser who lives by checklists. A gantry over fryers that takes 11 to 14-minute cycles and compresses their variants into 5 seconds while trimming burns and slips becomes a workers' compensation graph with a slope that makes risk managers nod. Kitchens are thermodynamics with grease, 50 to 70 degrees Celsius wash curtains and 80+ degree final rinse in dish tunnels fog optics if you let optics breathe. Aerosols with 1 to 10 micrometer droplets coat every surface you forgot to wipe, and induction beats open flame simply because a robot's depth camera does not hallucinate through a shimmering heat plume. The engineering choices that keep health inspectors calm are the material list, 316L stainless near acids and citruses, elastomer jaws that will not crack under diluted hypochlorite or quaternary ammonium, IP ratings that mean a wipe down is cleaning not attempted murder of a circuit board, and end effectors that disassemble to a sink in under 15 minutes because a manager with a flashlight at 110 has no sense of humor. Ski resorts and mountain towns only look pastoral when you do not count avalanche paths and wind. The robots that fit here are modest, grooming fleets with centimeter-accurate GNSS that cut fuel use by showing a driver where snow depth sits relative to grade. Drone light shows that can fly at 6 to 10 meters per second in a valley but stay grounded when katabatic winds surprise a ridge, and in some jurisdictions, limited avalanche work. Drones that carry small payloads to set off charges on cornices under very controlled windows with police and mountain ops on the same radio net. The rules are a braided rope across agencies, aviation authority permits for beyond visual line-of-sight corridors over unpopulated ridgelines, forestry and wildlife permissions that forbid flight during nesting weeks or over sensitive habitat, and liability that always lands back on the resort if a device finds a way to make a headline. Mountain logistics are gentler than they look when the radios and batteries are adult. Cold derates aggressively. Expect double-digit percentage hits to capacity when ambient drops below 0 degrees Celsius. And prop icing is not a metaphor, so coating choices, pre-flight warm-ups, and calendar discipline matter more than in a theme park where a breeze is the only antagonist. The future here is not prophecy so much as amortization. 10 years out, roof boxes with dock drones live on hotels and arenas the way elevator machine rooms do, and dawn sorties are normal. A pre-authorized corridor at 70 to 150 meters above ground. A thermal and RGB sweep at wind caps everyone on the team can recite. Defect manifests that feed a work order system rather than a Slack channel. And a log with pilot credentials, firmware versions, and file hashes that can survive discovery. 10 years out, runners in restaurants and concourses are so boring that the only time anyone says robot is on a maintenance ticket. And expo sites treat fleets as appliances that share power schedules with chillers and lighting, not curiosities that beg forgiveness from the electrician. 25 years out, venue design meets the machines halfway, wider service corridors at 1.2 to 1.5 meters, thresholds that do not attack small wheels, elevator controllers with signed APIs by default, and a municipal digital twin that understands, show at 9 p.m., hospital helipad silent at 21:05, allowable corridor here, so a planner stops discovering conflicts on a bad day. 50 years out, the phrase, robot hotel, will be as dated as electric theater. Floors, doors, and schedules will be robot native by construction, drones will be pixels turned into policy, and humanoid forms will remain in their cameo, chest height hands for doors, buttons, and theater, because the jobs worth automating here are the miles, the mops, and the views, not the smiles. Governance is the only part that drifts toward poetry because it is about trust, and trust is a loop. Guests will forgive a runner that pauses politely and announces itself. They will not forgive a camera that does not say what it keeps or for how long. Cities will permit drones in pairs with fire lanes if you publish your wind windows and decibel budgets. They will ban you for a summer if you improvise an ascent near a helipad. Staff will teach a small arm to hold a door and stage towels if their job title and pay band reflect the new skill. They will sabotage you with shrugs if you optimize their minutes into vapor. Insurers will pick up the phone on the second ring if your logs use the words they know. UL 3300, ISO 13482, Part 107, ESA 2019-947, ASTM F3322, attached to serial numbers and dates. They will make you wait if you show them a marketing deck. None of that is futuristic. All of it is the difference between a venue whose lobby at 2310 sounds like a suitcase wheel and a venue that becomes a TikTok about a robot blocking an exit. There is a joke hiding in these minutes. the bravura is disappearing and the competence is getting louder. Fireworks with ash and a toddler crying at 10 p.m. become LEDs at 80 decibels and a sky that goes dark in 16 minutes. 10 kilometers of server walking become 4 kilometers plus upselling. A towel cart that used to bruise shins moves at a meter per second and stops 30 centimeters before contact because someone calibrated a bumper that morning. The physics continues to be the physics, forces at handles, aerosols near fryers, wind shear near facades, jack limits in aisles, and the economics continue to be the economics, minutes shaved or injuries avoided, and the robots continue to be the boring colleagues that do not forget. If there is revolution here, it is that leisure finally reads like engineering, standards, schedules, laminated cards, and a city that still waves with all its fingers when you end the night. Procurement is where the romance of robots meets an accounts payable portal that closes at 5 p.m. whether you are ready or not. The operators who avoid expensive science projects write contracts like engineers and litigate the grief out in advance. A hotel group that runs on Oracle Opera or Agilysys specifies, in black letters, that delivery bots must authenticate to the PMS over a mutually authenticated API, store no cardholder data, and fail closed when the badge server drops packets. They fix the elevator handshakes in the scope, Schindler port, Kony API, Otis eCall, with rate limits, logging, and a test plan for car capture without trapping guests that a safety officer can perform with a stopwatch. They put ISO 13482 and UL 3300 into the acceptance criteria alongside ADA 2010 door forces and local fire code, and they name the edge cases. Deep pile carpet with a 10 to 15 mm threshold ramp, mirrored corridor pillars that light a lidar, and humidity in back-of-house corridors that pushes relative humidity beyond 50% for hours. They ask for pack IDs and cycle counts from the 48-volt battery fleet, and NFPA 70 compliant charging. Room with ventilation that a fire marshal can bless in 30 seconds, and the email address of the person who will ship a replacement power board across the Pacific when a lightning surge makes the robot swear in silence. The price is not the number on page 1, it is the mean time to resolution when a lid sticks at 2110 on a sold-out Saturday and the server has a tray someone still has to carry. The maintenance loop is the factory hiding inside the resort. The runners that survive a season get a technician and a schedule as strict as a Jets A check. Belts at 200 hours, wool hubs at 500, spring contacts cleaned weekly, lid switches replaced before they arc into comedy, and firmware only updated on Tuesdays after a rehearsal on a staging bot. A mattress class inspection drone that flies roofs at dawn has a maintenance Bible that looks like aviation, propellers discarded on a fixed cycle not to stretch the life, motor bearing checks by listening for frequency shifts nobody posts on TikTok, firmware pinned until after a storm season finishes, and logs that an insurer can subpoena without a scavenger hunt. AvidBots class scrubbers that push 80 to 120 liters of solution at 1 meter per second get squeegee lips swapped on a cadence, not at a whim. The difference between a Tuesday without streaks and a lawsuit with a bathroom sign is a piece of rubber and a manager who remembers that the last 3 meters are where injuries are born. The quiet revolution is the spare parts cabinet, O-rings that do not turn brittle under quads, quick disconnects that do not clog under syrup, and desiccants you change because you live in Miami and not in a brochure. Failure analysis, done honestly, reads like an anatomy textbook for embarrassment. The Nightscope lineage fountain plunge taught everyone who designs indoor patrols that slope, wheelbase, mass, and sensor field of view are not decorative. A security robot that weighs more than a person and sees at the wrong height will discover gravity on your dime. A delivery bot that stalls in a door swing at 1830 in Tokyo or Anaheim will become a collision lesson unless you have a stop distance printed in centimeters and tested on wet tile. UL 3300 gives the language and the limits, but you still have to hold a ruler to the bumper. Drone shows have their own pathology. Gust steps above 8 to 10 meters per second at 100 meters altitude give you distributed trouble, so the production that lasts wires a wind profiler into its go, no-go rule, keeps return to home rings practiced like a fire drill, and treats bird behavior like a variable, not a story. Kitchen lines prove that aerosols at 1 to 10 micrometers glue themselves to optics, that fryer hoods sized in cubic meters per minute are not a vibe but a math problem, and that advancing from pilot to production means you pick elastomers and cable jackets that can endure sodium hypochlorite and paracetic, not pretend they can. None of these are AI problems, they are geometry and chemistry, and the only cure is a log and a torque wrench. Cybersecurity in hospitality is not a movie, it is VLANs, radios with hall passes, and refusing to let a tray bot sit on the same network as a point-of-sale system just because both need Wi-Fi. A casino floor in Nevada or a tower in Dubai that pretends 2.4 GHz is a playground will discover that guest phones will drown any robot that tries to stream a pretty video. the survivors segment. Private LTE at 3.5 GHz for command and control with SIMs bound to device serials, 6 GHz Wi-Fi in back of house for the FAT images from facade inspections, and low-duty BLE or UWB for staff and asset location that you delete on schedule and never confuse with surveillance. They sign code, not emails, they pin firmware hashes, not trust vendor promises, and they practice lost link behavior under radios that are deliberately cruel. The compensation controls are boring and adult. TLS on every hop, no default credentials anywhere, roles that match job descriptions to robot privileges, and the oldest fix in the book, which is, turn it off when you do not need it, exercised nightly by a closing checklist that cares about radios and not just ovens. Digital twins are where this becomes a pleasure instead of a chore. The venue that survives storm season without a migraine is the one that treats its roofs, facades, and show fields as geometries with version control. They pull OGC-flavored models into a simulation that knows about parapet caps and penthouse eddies, then schedule dawn flights that will not pretend a wind shadow is a surprise. They annotate drains and tile seams so a thermal run at 610 flags ponding where it can actually form, not where someone's memory thinks it did last year. They take Q geometries and feed them to a runner's route generator so strollers do not back the house to panic. They place UWB anchors with a surveyor's patience so decimeter truths hold through a season of drywall dust and holiday decorations. If a city attorney needs a noise map, or a neighbor wants to know why a show ends at 21:30 in July, the model is not a slide, it is a map with decibels that were measured, a flight corridor that was published, and a permit number that gets you nods instead of emails with 17 people in the CC line. Training is a human project with radios. The crews that like their robots treat the gear like colleagues with specific quirks and competencies. They teach a night housekeeper with tendinitis to swap battery packs without lifting with their back, teach a bartender to clear a sticky line on a robot dispenser without taking the station down, and teachers show tech to say, no go, into a MIC when a gust step hits a threshold, not when a director looks worried. Pilot currency for drones is not a lapel pin, it is a record a regulator can recognize in April 2025 and in October 2026. The crews who pass every audit keep their remote pilot training visible, their night ops refreshers on a calendar, and their firmware pinned like they mean it. The best line cooks in White Castle or a stadium concession learn to trust a gantry because someone printed the cleaning schedule in their language and sized it to the sink. The best security teams tolerate a patrol robot in a lobby because the e-stop is obvious. A human responds within 30 seconds to a button push, and the robot never, ever, rolls into a restroom. Labor peace is paperwork expressed as compassion. The Culinary Union in Las Vegas or Unite here in Atlantic City is not allergic to gears. It is allergic to surprises and job scopes written as afterthoughts. The program that survives year 2 lays out titles, Fleet Technician, Autonomy Wrangler, Show Pilot, alongside pay bands and pathways. It writes down who cleans, who swaps packs, who signs the battery cabinet logs, and who gets called at 2:30 when a charger hiccups. It ties the robot minutes to human minutes transparently. A 600-room tower recovers 13 to 20 labor hours per day by taking 8 to 12 minutes off 100 turns. A 300-cover restaurant sells 2 more rounds per table at the peak because a runner shaved kilometers off a server's night. A park swaps pyrotechnic crew overtime for drone show prep and gets cleaner facilities and fewer filters clogged the next morning. Those numbers are not cudgels, they are the ledger you use to argue for raises and additional bodies, and the story you tell a safety committee when sprains start dropping and claims adjusters stop calling. Energy is the bill everyone pretended was weather until it was not. Battery cabinets are not a corner, they are an engineered space with fire ratings and air changes per hour, pack IDs, and cycle counts visible to any auditor, and kill switches that a night manager can hit without guessing which breaker feeds which charger. Microgrids on big campuses, parks, convention centers, mega resorts, learn to schedule scrubbers, runners, and inspection drones around peak tariffs. They learn that a 600-watt scrubber fleet charging in concert at 2 p.m. on a 90-degree day will make a utility think you love money less than climate, and they move that habit to 2 o'clock because a spreadsheet told them it was kind. The environmental story is not emojis about green tech, it is batteries recycled under agreements that list what happens to cobalt, nickel, and aluminum. It is chargers installed to code, not with extension cords that look like public safety fan fiction. It is an HVAC curve smoothed because inspection finds the condenser that is running 10 degrees Celsius hot before the 4th of July weekend. A robot that pays rent is a smaller electric bill, not a speech. Interoperability is the least glamorous hero in the room. If you want fleets that age well over a decade instead of a season, you stop buying plastic with proprietary radios and start buying behaviors with standardized verbs. A tugger that can talk to an elevator today should still talk to the next controller you install in 2030. A delivery bot that can unlock a Salto or Asa Abloy Strike today should still unlock the one you retrofit when you swap to mobile credentials. A drone that flies a specific category corridor in Paris should come home and fly a Part 107 compliant Dawn mission in Orlando without a second software stack. The path out of lock-in is boring and grown up. Oasis-flavored APIs for building systems, MQTT for fleet telemetry, REST for tasks, a state machine you can print on a card, and a policy that says, no closed protocols in doorways or elevators, because your future self refuses to negotiate with a firm that owns your hinges. Accessibility is not a sidebar, it is the line between toy and appliance. A runner that elbows its way through a breakfast buffet is not merely rude, it is in violation of ADA and local equivalents. The robots that belong around people know the speed and separation math that lives in ISO 13482 and, for industrial cousins, ISO 3691-4. They cap accelerations so a child's hand cannot turn a right into an anecdote, and they speak with lights and sounds that someone with low vision or hearing can parse. The standards writers finally caught up to the foyer in 2024 when UL 3300 introduced explicit accessibility considerations. Your job as an operator is to require those features at purchase and test them in the lobby before anyone has coffee. The payoff is less philosophical than it is human. A machine that signals its turns and waits for a stroller wins you a thanks you will remember when you sit down to write next year's budget. Regulation is not a villain, it is a lifeline that keeps neighbors from making you famous. On the ground, UL 3300 and ISO 13482 are not documents you wave, they are a procurement filter and a training script. In the air, Part 107 in the United States, Regulation 2019-947 in the European Union, Cap 722 in the United Kingdom, and Canada's Part 9 tell you exactly when you can fly roofs and when you cannot. They tell you what lights to use at night, what proximity to people is acceptable with which safety mitigations, and how to treat remote ID as a badge and not a chore. The operators who never make the news have a specific category SORA packet in a drawer, a site survey with cones that match a diagram, and observers whose radios do not share channels with crowd control headsets. If you never want to explain your choices on a local morning show, treat regulation as choreography that keeps everyone on the beat. Liability is a math problem with signatures. Insurers who used to shudder at the word drone now discount policies when you bring in inspection logs with hashes, pilot credentials that have birthdays, and defect lists that match work orders. Workers' compensation carriers do not need a TED talk, they need the reduction in sprains in a dish room where runners carry racks that used to cross slick tile on foot, and the before and after line on firefighter level slip protection at pools where a Matronics class robot runs nightly. When something goes wrong, and it will, because physics is not sentimental, the difference between a headline and a paragraph is an incident report with stop distances, jerk limits, battery temperatures, and decision trees you can match to a training binder. If your robot does not give you the data to do that, you did not buy an appliance, you bought a mascot. Culture is the layer that makes any of this livable. Guests in 2025 arrive everywhere with a camera and a skepticism that is healthy when you remember how many people have promised them magic that did not arrive. The venues that fold robots into daily life without feeling like a science fair tell the truth on laminated cards, what the machine is called, what it does not do, whether it records, how long anything is kept, and who to talk to if it is not behaving. They put a name at the bottom and a phone number or QR that goes to a human who knows how to help. They do not pretend to have invented the future, and they do not act wounded if someone says, I prefer a person. They put the machines in the places where physics hates us most, stairs with carts, roofs in heat, back of house corridors in monsoon air, and leave the front of house smiles to people with jokes. The research pipeline looks very little like YouTube and very much like a trade show where everyone brought their homework. You can safely ignore the biped sprint races until the elbows are soft and the joints are back-drivable because a dining room is not a hurdles track. You can also safely ignore anyone who thinks a drone should carry a drink. What will matter over the next 5 years in hospitality is gust-aware formation control that lets drone shows thread canyons and palm rows politely, specular-agnostic depth for runners on marble and wet tile, tactile skins on small manipulators that detect slip below a millimeter and cut force before a ramekin becomes a missile, and elevator integrations that treat 30-year-old relay logic as an environment, not an insult. The laboratories doing this work are not only in Palo Alto and Tokyo, they are in Madison, Orlando, Nagoya, and Wuppertal, where building codes, housekeeping carts, and dish pits tell a different truth than a demo stage. The operators who will get their ribbon cut are the ones who install beacons, paint fiducials discreetly, publish winged caps, and rehearse aboard ladders. The difference between daring and reckless is rehearsals. Sustainability is not a press release. It is a room where charges live without catching fire and a spreadsheet that shows why you cancelled 4 fireworks nights in July in favor of 12 quiet drone shows at 60 to 150 meters above ground level. A property that keeps the confidence of its neighbors, recycles packs, desorts the robots that live near the sea, and builds battery cabinets with ratings that a fire inspector quotes with a smile. It publishes decibel windows and then obeys them when a promoter tries to plead minute 42 into a curfew. It treats water with respect where robots clean pools and decks. It logs free chlorine, combined chlorine, pH, and oxidation reduction potential so a child's skin does not tell you what your probes should have. The greenest thing in hospitality is a maintenance record that catches leaks before they turn into mold and nights in a neighborhood where a show ends on time because you like the people who have to sleep. By now the pattern should feel insultingly adult and, yes, slightly funny. The robots that actually change hospitality are not the ones you put on a poster. They are the wheeled carts that take the punishment out of miles and stairs, the scrubbers that turn sticky floor from a complaint into a coverage map, the drone boxes on roofs that fly as soon as wind and law let them, and the small polite manipulators that hold doors and stage amenities so a housekeeper's back can be a back tomorrow. They speak standards and publish logs. They do not improvise near toddlers. They ask the elevator nicely and then write down what happened. They expand the jobs of the people already working at 2 in the morning. They make the ledger move with minutes that become dollars, not adjectives. The ending is better for being unglamorous. A hotel in Kyoto, a park in Paris, a cruise ship in the Caribbean, a casino in Macau, all wake before their guests and move a fleet so predictable you can dance to it. Batteries charge where they should. Radios speak the languages they need and never the ones they should not. Doors yield for carts whose bumpers have scratches where the stories used to be. Elevators remember promises. A drone rises into a sky that belongs to birds and laws first, and to logos only by permission. A runner glides past a stroller without a story. And a person, paid to be excellent at being human, looks at the quiet, laughs at how much of this is plumbing, and gets on with the work of turning thermodynamics, acoustics, and schedules into hospitality. The revolution is choreography that lets meaning happen. The punchline is that it was always going to be.